Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, all of our honored guests. Have you ever been lost? Lost in a place that you just didn't know where you were at. And then you have that sort of sinking feeling, your heart starts pumping, you get all sweaty because you're lost. And then do you remember when, I know where I'm at? You start breathing normal again. You stand up with confidence because you were lost, and now you've been found. I had that experience about 3 weeks ago. I was on a business trip in St. Paul, Minnesota. I was the first to arrive at our joint meeting, and I was put in charge of picking up the van. Shannon, did I ever tell you I was directionally impaired and haven't driven a van in 18 years?
No.
Of course, I said, of course, I'll pick up the van. I said, I'm going to be a big girl about this. Well, my flight was late, but I got there, and I got off the plane, walked with confidence through the airport, wondering, where do I pick up this van? So I went over to the counter, asked the gentleman, excuse me, I need to go to Enterprise to pick up the van. He pointed me in the right direction. I said, thank you very much. So I drug my luggage along with my PC, made it to where I needed to get to, got in line. My phone rang. It was one of my colleagues. Yes, I know my flight was late, but I'm in line now to get the van. I'll be there to get you folks in a minute. Now, we had a 1 o'clock meeting, and it's about 11:30 now. I proceed up to the counter, nice customer service, told me, well, that's okay that you're late, no problem. Let me show you the van. Mary, did I tell you I'm directionally impaired and haven't driven a van in 18 years?
Yes, at least once.
But that's okay, because I'm going to be a big girl about this. So I get to the van and I see the van. It's a huge van. It has to hold about 6 of us. It's silver, chic looking. The customer service rep takes me around to make sure there's no dents or anything in the car. Great. I get in the van, sit there with confidence, ask, by the way, now where's Terminal 1 Airport? Because I need to pick up my colleagues. Oh, all you need to do is just follow that winding road out, turn on the streets, pick up Route 5. You'll be fine. Peggy, did I tell you I was directionally impaired and haven't driven a van in 18 years? So I got in, got on the highway, looked for Route 5, followed it around, and I do remember them telling me, now just in case, you should be traveling no more than 3 minutes, 3 minutes. If you're traveling that far, you've probably gone too far. I was confident. I knew to look for Route 5. I kept my gaze on Route 5. I steered the van driving on Route 5, and I'm driving, relaxed. I said, hey, I'm handling this van pretty good. I think I can do this. And then all of a sudden I realized something. I didn't hear any more airplanes.
Yeah.
I'm looking around outside. It's sort of a cloudy day. The snow is gently falling. I don't see any airplanes either. Panic set in. I said to myself, I'm in Minnesota. Don't know where I'm at. Driving a van. I'm lost. I want to pick up my colleagues by 1 o'clock. What am I going to do? I grasped the wheel. That sick feeling hit. I am lost. What am I going to do? So I pulled over to the side. I wanted to just break down in tears, but I said, no, I need to be a big girl about this. Then that quiet voice said, Cynthia, Cynthia, don't you have a GPS? Yes, Cynthia, Cynthia. That same GPS that had you pulled out of line in security because they had to check your bag. I pulled over to the curb, frantically turned, grabbed my satchel, pulled out the GPS, plugged it in, and I remembered, look for points of interest, look for the airplane. Hit airplane. Make a U-turn. Made my U-turn, proceed 3 miles down the road. So I turned back on the road. I said, hey, Van and we're on one accord now. I'm going in the right direction. So I'm driving, and Alicia, guess what I see? I see airplanes as I'm driving. I hear airplanes. I must be going in the right direction. Then I suddenly took my eyes off because I saw a row of cars. Maybe I should turn in here. Even though Jack DeGarman didn't say that, I just knew where I was going there. Then I realized I stopped right on the railroad track. Not the best place to stop. Then I looked a little further down. I saw T. I looked even closer. T-E. Could that be terminal? I knew then, no, I must veer back on the road, the straight and narrow. So I turned the van, the gray big van, back on the road. I think I'm going to be okay. That is the terminal. The phone rang again. Now, I usually don't answer the phone while I'm driving, but I did that time because I knew my coworkers were looking for me. Hey, Ruby, I'm not far. I got just slightly turned around. I dare not tell them that I was panicking and on the verge of tears. No, don't worry, I'll be right there. Because I think I see you guys, just hang on. So I kept on. And as I turned in the terminal, went to the road, the van and I were on one accord. This big, giant, threatening van and I were one for that brief moment. Now I wish I could tell you that the rest of the trip, the van and I was in harmony with one another, because I became the designated driver for the entire year. Alicia, did I tell you I was directionally impaired and had driven the van in 18 years? I didn't tell my coworkers either. But I picked them up, we made it to our meeting, and I said, well, I'm going to handle this van. This van and I are going to become friends because I'm the designated driver for the team. And even though that night we had the big major snowfall in Minnesota, I got up early the next morning, Tuesday, and said, let me clean off my van. The van, it's my van now. As I walked toward the van, I saw like 80 feet of snow on the van. I had this toothbrush of a cleaner. I guess I needed to clean off this van.
Cynthia, I loved that speech. I thought it was fun, it was delightful. I had a good time just sitting here, just enjoying your enthusiasm about it and your delivery. I thought the way your gestures kind of underscored the verbal things that you were doing. I love the repetition where you came back to certain people in the audience periodically and said, did I tell you this? Did I mention, oh, by the way, I can't drive? I loved the asides looking up into the heavens. I just thought it was for the amount of time you had, it really kept my attention riveted. I was just a little disappointed at the ending because I kind of wanted it to keep going.
Very great performance, speech. When you had a superb greeting and your audience interaction was, I thought was brilliant. I don't see that very often, and I was just at a seminar and everybody's just up there and they don't interact or call in anybody, and I think that goes back to I think what Tim was saying about the scene in the Sold, maybe, and your stage presence. That I think is what did it, and it's like you were telling a personal story, and I could relate to that and feel it. So.
I really like your gesture, and yours number 5 speech, right? It's body speech. I feel your body really speaks. As an audience, I totally understand and totally get what you're trying to show us. And there are several things that I really love. Is the first, you throw the question, have you ever been lost? And you paused for seconds for our audience to think about this. That's very good. The other is pace. I noticed you didn't speak very fast and just keep it like in a very good pace. The other is you're trying to use some visual aid, trying to use your phone, really try to see it's really talking in the phone with your colleagues. This, I think, is good way to just grab the audience into the scene. And the one thing is for the audience interaction, you ask several audience, did I tell you something? So this grab their attention.
I enjoyed this speech very much since your problems are one I share. I once spent 5 hours lost in the suburbs on my birthday. It was awful. One of the things that I really liked was that you just waited quietly till everyone was seated before you began your speech, which I think shows confidence. A lot of people who are nervous will get up there and just start blabbering before people are ready to listen to them. I thought that you did a great job of using your body in the speech. I liked how you talked about how big the van was, and you kind of walked around when you were inspecting it to see if there was any damage, and you grasped the wheel. And I also really liked your despair, something which I totally understand. A couple of things that I think you could work on. You started several sentences with now, which is kind of a verbal tick. A sentence, I think, is much more effective when you don't have one of those filler words to start it.
Okay.
Also, I am not crazy about the verbal shout-outs. Mary, what do you think? Shannon, what do you think? If it's a specific question of somebody, that's okay, but I'm somebody who kind of likes to sit in the audience, and I don't want a bunch of people staring at me. And so as soon as you say Shannon, I'm worried that every single person is now turned to look at me, and it's like, no, look at her. Okay. And you said a couple of times the van and I were on one accord. I think you meant of one accord. Cool. But I enjoyed the speech. I love the personal story, and I share your agony.
Cynthia, as a professional speech coach, just a few things thought were strengths. I think that it's okay to use audience names. I mean, some audience people aren't going to like it. It's just kind of a risk, but it does draw people in. And the nice thing about it is it makes people pay attention. Whether they like it or not, they pay more attention once you start using their name, because then they're focused in on you. And it's like, well, better pay, especially if they were dozing off or something. You used the you had a good question, there was a dialogue going on, internal dialogue, you talk about how you're thinking and what sort of things are going through your mind. You had a good prop. The stories were known and heard. There's one place I don't think where it was really seen. You couldn't see what was going on. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And you did have a kind of foundational phrase. This whole phrase you repeated over and over again, did I mention that? That became kind of this idée fixe, this foundational phrase throughout your speech, which was creative. Thinking about developments, you probably know this already, but starting out, the opening 15, 30 seconds of your speech, the most important parts of your speech. So instead of starting by thanking people, just go right into your speech. Okay. And if you want to thank them, you can always thank them a little bit later in the speech. I think you paused after questions okay at the beginning, but then you kind of rushed things afterwards. Okay. Pause after each question as you go through. Maybe think about the word imagine and put people directly into the scene from the very beginning. That might be a way to do it too. This thing that wasn't seen was the counter girl. It was this kind of anonymous counter girl. So what does she look like? Describe her a little bit. And step out of the story more. Instead of particularly using audience names, if that might be an issue, you could also just say, have you ever, or did you ever? Or more of that, so you don't get so caught up in your story. Some of the audience will follow you, some of them won't. But if you continually use the you, it connects and brings them in. A little bit of leaning on the table in some places. And another thing about the wheel. I know people do this sort of thing with the driving, but maybe take a look at what you're actually doing in driving. People usually drive like this, not like this. It's more like running.
I do.
But a lot of speakers who use their kids, they don't have realistic gestures. And then finally, relevance. A wasn't quite sure how it was relevant to me. And then what's really the point? What's the thing we're supposed to do, think, or feel afterwards we take on and use and apply in our lives? Interesting speech. Just challenges developing and figure out what's it really about.
I thought it was a very entertaining speech, and some of the things I love are your confidence. It came through very clearly up here. Posture and your pauses and your eye contact and the way you carry yourself. The other thing I liked was that this was speech number 5 with body language, and a lot of times people don't really incorporate too much body language or craft a speech that will incorporate body language, and you definitely did that. And I've been at some meetings before where TM especially will point out, isn't that how you hold a phone, or all these strange things that people do, you know, whatever it may be. And I thought it was very wise of you to bring a real phone so that you were very realistic there. My suggestion for growth, unlike Shannon, I don't feel I get lost very much. So I did have some trouble relating to the speech. I thought your introduction was, have you ever been lost? And you was like, not that badly. I mean, I never panicked or felt that bad about it. So I had a little trouble relating to that speech. It was entertaining, but again, as Tim said at the end, I'm not really seeing the whole point other than to tell a story that was fun. And so I would encourage you to rework it a little bit to appeal to all of us, even if we're not directionally impaired, or we think we're not.
Cynthia, your big girl speech was fantastic. You took on the challenge of sharing with us a weakness. And you built that into each step, including your feelings, your body language, very much you. You were within yourself, and you shared very honestly a real life experience. You had great timing, pauses, gestures, involved the audience, teased us a little bit with your repetitive questions, a little razzing, very true to your true character and your big girl wisdom, knowing to involve us. You got us to the point where you grasped the wheel and you were losing your big girl approach. You started out very confident, perhaps overconfident and a little naive, as we all have experienced. Then you got to the point where you were losing it, and we could feel it. You really hit that chord strong. That panic setting in, I could feel it. And then the recovery, very good expression. When you did go from the real, you really let your face droop and let us feel the building panic, and then the recovery, you were moving out of it, starting to think on your feet, which I think is part of being that adult person, and noticing little soft signs, not just being in Never Land, driving thinking you knew where you were going. So I think we benefited from every aspect of your planned speech, and some of the areas where you might improve. I know the ones that were mentioned were great. You could use the word have you ever or imagine. You could grab the wheel a little bit more realistically instead of up and down. And you could emphasize the point of your speech, perhaps a little bit more in a generic manner for those who were not generically, who were not directionally challenged. And you could talk about overcoming a weakness, perhaps. And that would be a very broad appeal. Watch if you're using the word now as a filler, move more to saying words that would bring us into your intent. And I thought there were a couple opportunities for humor within your speech, and I was kind of expecting them. And I'm not good enough to come up with those off the cuff, but some of our colleagues might help us. And one of them, when you built your relationship with the van, which I loved. And I wanted to hear more about the character of that van.
Good
And that
point.
van could almost have been even more personified. You were going there. A few anecdotes of things maybe we could remember. Maybe the sound of the motor, and maybe your perception of the sound of the motor changed, even though maybe it didn't, but it did, depending on, you know, now the van. Blame it on the van. Maybe you need to blame it on the van. Otherwise, I think that it was certainly an excellent speech. It moved along very quickly for me, and I echo Gary's comments that I didn't quite want it to be over again.